Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. In the first place, Alacero, thank you for your presence here, and thank you very much, Alacero, for providing me this opportunity of interacting with all of you here today. Alacero has a very important role. It is a privilege for me to be able to speak to you today. Alacero has an important role, which is maintaining visible and united our industry at the level of our region. Also, amongst the essential aspects of future steel industry, let's hope we have achieved focusing on the most salient aspects of the challenges we face in the steel industry. I wanted to briefly comment on the things I see as essential for our industry towards the future. The fragmentation and regionalization of the industry is a subject that will not affect the stagnation, and the industrialization of our countries is another subject which is relevant for the growth of our sector. The challenge that China represents for our industry and for the manufacturing industry in our region, and the importance of a common action with all our value chain, from the supplier to the client to the communities to the associations also, and the unions, which are all part of what I call an amplified value chain. And finally, zero emissions or decarbonization, that may be a threat, but also a very important opportunity for our sector. In the first place, the issue of regionalization. If I look at the industry as it is today and compare it to 20 years ago, when we were in World Steel, the change has been dramatic. Each region, each country is defining its own strategy in a different manner. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico, we see them as a whole. They have chosen the road for the defense of the industrial dimension. This is applied with a lot of determination by the Republicans or Democrats. It is interesting, and the change of paradigm. U.S. 20 years ago, for example, we find a different thing altogether. Today, United States, under hegemonic tension and geopolitical tension, chooses the road of strong defense of the industry. Europe and Japan also a line of defense, but with tools which are not that clear, and with a big difference. The fragmentation in the table of the European society or community is notorious. The way in which we react to the context implies protection of the manufacturing steel industry. The carbon board adjustment mechanisms, that's a measure that aims at protectionism, but with important subsidy to promote decarbonization, which is uncertain. There is a lot of mistrust in Europe about the future of the industry based on the complexity of governance. Now there are two countries, India, with an impressive growth. Today, India amounts to 8% of the world's steel consumption. In 10 years, it will amount to 17% of the world consumption. This is a growth that doesn't look into decarbonization issues, but rather is constructed around blast furnaces. And when we speak about direct reduction or indirect reduction, India looks at the costs. It wants to become a leader in the sector and compete with China. This is the reality that we will see throughout the years. China has reached a level of consumption close to 50% of the world population during the last years, with a reduction of the dynamics of economy and dynamics of the infrastructure. It has been able to reduce consumption by 10%. It hasn't reduced production, but it is injecting in the market 120 million tons per year. This is a very important number of capacity excess, amounting to 15% of the demand compared to the rest of the world. So the fall in Argentinian consumption is causing a very strong pressure, especially in systems of steel. In this context and excess capacity, it is very difficult to articulate at a worldwide level when we speak about world steel. It is very difficult in regional institutions like Alacero to construct a common agenda on excess capacity, for example, articulation with the value chain and decarbonization. Each region, each country is implementing its own measure to imagine the quality of economic development. In the case of Latin America, the context is particularly fragmented. If we think that Latin America, each country belongs to different blocks, Mexico reasons within the framework of what NAFTA does and looks towards the north, and it has achieved good results. Brazil between the Mercosur also, but the BRICS that become more and more relevant because of the relevance of China. So participation in different spaces, a very different reality, because all in all, clearly enough, the position in issues of steel industry, manufacturing industry of Chile compared to Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina is very different. Fragmentation, which is very important, and thus the complexity of the role of Alacero, which is to create a common agenda between the countries that have a different agenda. Now, there is something common to all the region, which is an economic stagnation, low level of economic growth, deindustrialization, reduction of the participation of industry in the countries, and also Mexico, that since the 90s has been able to construct a different matrix.
So what is there behind these two factors, which are very damaging to our consumption and steel consumption? As a consequence, steel consumption is at very low levels if compared with any international indicator. Regarding stagnation, 15 years ago, Latin American economies represented around 9% of the global GDP. Today, that figure is 7%. Latin America has lost not only relevance in the geopolitical arena, but it has also lost relevance or weight or share, I would say, the global GDP. Per capita growth in 15 years has been around 10% in general terms. In the US, 25%. And in Europe, 15%. So we have grown less than Europe. This is a token of a significant stagnation. Desindustrialization, well, as well, Brazil is an example. Now the current level is 10%, something similar in Argentina, with the exception of Mexico's. The other countries in the region, the weight of industry is that below Europe, 17%, or 20-25% in Asian countries and in Mexico. So, desindustrialization, no? Imbalance in manufactured goods. Imbalance with China, in the trade of these manufactured products. That's around $250, and a weakness in exporting capacity to export manufactured goods. So the consumption of steel per capita in Latin America has grown very little, for 114 to 119 kilograms. That's practically nothing in 15 years. In Korea, it's around 600, China, similar figures, Europe and the US also 2 or 3 times above consumption in our region. So I look at these data and I see the problems that we have faced in building an industrial matrix. But I see an opportunity as well. Insofar as our countries go back to this pathway of development, industrialization, and entrance into the world economy, we will be able to achieve this growth. Let's think of infrastructure, manufacture, instead of being able to fully grow. So, what are the root causes for this stagnation? And I think that over many years, democratic governments in the region have applied economic policies which have consistently made it impossible to achieve the development we needed, the systematic growth of the state, tax burden, the complexity, the overlapping of taxes, employment regulations, legal uncertainty in many cases, the reduced quality of school systems, of universities. All of this has contributed to the loss of competitiveness and the increase of informality. This is very serious in Latin America because the informal market destroys part of the value chain and affects competitiveness and profitability of the businesses in the region. A very complex value chain like the steel chain with all the stages, all the members, all the vendors. This type of chain is very vulnerable to the volatility of these policies and these constraints. These policies have not achieved a key goal for our society: sustainable development, economic and social development, and the creation of opportunities for people and businesses, and the defense of our people's rights. Stagnation, in short, results from the government belief, no matter right or left, governance and consensus should be built on an enlarged role by the state instead of the private sector. They prefer to use the state's own resources instead of promoting private ownership and involvement. But limited growth, disindustrialization, in my opinion, this is the representation of collective failure, which has brought about catastrophic consequences, and this will remain so if we do not revert this process. In this context, what we see in Argentina is significant because, after all, many of the topics and problems I have been mentioning I mean, these elements which have constrained our economy and our growth today are present and are a target of President Milei's actions. So, if we think of the shrinkage of the state, a smaller deficit, and what else? The significant reduction in the complexity of all the regulations and the economic system. You see, on the agenda now, today, there are very significant transformation topics, and these are elements presented to voters from this point of view. So what is being done today is what the presidential candidate said he was going to do. So we have seen a drop in inflation, a drop in the country risk. People are paying more attention to this transformation project, and this is important. But, of course, there is still a long way to go. The exchange market, for instance, should be more open in order to attract investments massively, investments which make it possible to transform the economy. And I'm saying this because this is very relevant. I mean, all of this could reorient changes, initiatives in the region, which might bring these paradigms into question. These paradigms about the role of the state have constrained growth and development, and these constraints have not helped Latin America to have a wider presence in this global steel value chain. But vis-a-vis, in the face of this situation, we can think of China, an industrial powerhouse with geopolitical ambitions, not only economic ambitions, with a desire to expand not only its value chain, but also its area of influence from the military, economic, and social point of view. And all of this has contributed to making our economy more primary, I would say. It has absorbed commodities, raw materials, and it has flooded us with some basic goods. And this entry into the global trade is based on raw materials with value chains that are less impactful on the creation of employment and on the transformation of the society. But on the other hand, this makes it possible to control inflation, to control prices, in the absence of manufactured goods, which are arriving into our country in some cases with a price below the cost of production. China's share and participation has gone up from 10% to 35%. There has never been such a transfer of productive activity in such a short period. This has not taken place in a context similar to the West, because they have an authoritarian government able to capture the surplus of the increase in production, employment, manufacture, infrastructure. China is not a democracy. They have an authoritarian government, a centralized system of governance, with the ability to allocate resources through centralized decisions, and very efficiently. They are very efficient in attaining objective goals, and they also face risks, of course. All things as they stand, it's not easy to foresee what's going to happen over the next 10 years. And so we need to see and understand what happens. this will also depend on the conflicts between China and the West. One flight crash, let's say, an accident in the south of China, might radically change the way we approach trade with China and the future of our geopolitical relationships. We have seen this in the case of Russia. And, one theory held by Germany based on the export of energy, that changed radically in a brief time. Today, Germany is facing its second year of recession. In the case of China, it's difficult to say where we will be standing in 10 years, but we see the impact on our economies. China's imports keep Czech inflation under control, but they have a corrosive effect on the many industries. China has a strong stance regarding steel, promoting investments and surplus excess capacity, I would say, strengthening manufacturing and the value chain. They want to export more. They are playing strongly in the arena of renewable energies. They have modified technology. They are taking advantage of this energy transition. Batteries, lithium, etc., copper, everything ends in plants within China. 75, 80, 90%, depending on the materials. So the occupation of this value chain has been the result of a conscious policy which has been very effective, but in short, it creates some kind of dependence. More recently, China's direct investments have been widened in car making in every sector, infrastructure, together with a flow of imports and manufactured goods. So we see those aspects that create this desindustrialization in our countries. But this brings opportunities because China's advancement has exposed risk factors. This is a widespread perception, not only for semiconductors, rare earths, or some specific goods. It's something global about the repositioning of the value chain, reshoring, as Americans call it. But it's a key driver. Mexico's economy and investments are influenced by this demand to reposition the value chain. But this is our opportunity. This is the opportunity for Latin America and its value chain, its steel, to go back on scene on these products, these manufactured goods, which are important for the West. This is our opinion, of course. And I want to highlight the relevance of the value chain. Latin America can play a very significant role, no doubt. But there we should think not only about steel, but all our value chains, and we have to forge alliances. We have to prevent this rupture of the different rings in this chain. Of course, there is a temptation. We might fall into, intermediary good manufacturers might want to import from China and then to export, enjoying certain protections. If there is a conflict along the chain, I think that we will see a weakening of our response capacity. I mean, the steel, the manufacturing sector, and in short, this is something that all associations in the countries, at the regional level, in Europe as well, and the US, and we have to focus on. There is no future of transformation and expansion in our sector if we are unable to integrate our interests with the interests of all our value chain. If the desires and aspirations of each segment in the value chain is focused on opening the market for its own inputs and by protecting its goods, that's, a zero-sum game. We have to change this reality and forge alliances, and I think that's one of the key goals, not only for steel, but for all the associations in our countries. This is a huge opportunity. Our countries have a chance to widen economic integration with big economic blocs, with a political affinity and shared values. North America, Europe, Australia, Japan, all the countries in the West, against which we can compete on an equal footing. With China, this is impossible. Our industry cannot compete with China because we are not playing on a level field. And this reshoring thing, is something that we should follow and closely monitor in order to see what concrete steps can be taken, not only in Mexico. But for this, states' policies should support us. The defense against unfair competition is of the essence. Stability, the rules of the game, lower taxes on the cost of labor, on production, foreign exchange rate, that should reflect total factor productivity. The quality, the predictability of legal systems, the quality of human resources training, people's safety, the respect for private property. Investors, domestic or foreigners, they assess all these factors. That's institutional quality, the ease to do business, but also the government's commitments to defend industries. We need governments to act and to make their support explicit. They should gamble on the growth of our industries, of the steel sector. This would attract more investments because all of our agenda requires significant investments, which can be made only if businesses' profitability allows so. In order to transform technology, the adoption of tools like decarbonization, artificial intelligence, we need solid, healthy businesses able to invest, but not pressured by increasing indebtedness. Energy transition. I see this as an opportunity. An opportunity to enter trade differently, an opportunity to strengthen our businesses, environmental impact, decarbonization. I tend to separate the wheat from the chaff, I say. On the one hand, there is an indispensable need to reduce the environmental impact in the communities where we operate. And there is a commitment to improving the quality of air, water, and natural resources. The relationship with our community is key. If the community forsakes us and prefers, trade operations to be installed in the community instead of a steel plant, if that happens, we all lose. It's very difficult to think of a future. So the relationship with the community, with our people, is a key factor. Decarbonization, the reduction of CO2 emissions with different technologies is also a very significant factor to remain alive in the value chain. Our relationship with the community is key. Our license to operate within this value chain is also relevant. Latin America has wonderful conditions. I would say first, current consumption. CO2 emission is 2.6% of global emissions. China represents 57% of all global emissions. Europe, 6%. So, you see the dimension of our challenge. In a context of expansion and defense of the industrial sector, our sector can plan a pathway towards this transition. So, by increasing quotas, electric steel, maybe the decommissioning of some blast furnaces, the use of every available technology for carbon capture and sequestration, and changes in gas injection system. You see, all of this can be planned ahead in order to reduce our footprint. This can be done, and the availability of renewable energies, solar, wind, etc., in Latin America makes us privileged to embark on this transition. And the conditions are completely different from the conditions faced by Europe. They have many objective challenges in this regard. And I think that here we also have an advantage. Now, let's see some of the conclusions.
Looking into the future, I believe the agenda of steel industry in Latin America should contemplate or envisage dialogue and the creation of a partnership amongst all the links of the chain in order to achieve a critical mass, in order to create opportunities for the private initiative, reduce the control of a state, unleash creative capacity, and reduce taxes, improve safety, and all the measures that will allow us to create a common agenda with the states, with the governments. And secondly, or second point, the promotion of the repositioning of the value chain with a view to the Western society with whom we share values and principles and with whom we feel that we can compete, knowing that with China there is no space for loyal competition. There is the need to have a relationship with defense of the trade space, innovation and modernization in our process. Our companies need to go through technical transformation, through digital transformation, and incorporate tools that will allow us to substantially improve productivity, because we have a mandate in place which is important in order to be able to legitimate our value chain. We need productivity standards aligned with the best in the world. A fourth issue, catering for the needs of communities. This is fundamental because in my experience I have seen situations where the separation of interests of the communities and the companies has led to the destruction or to the closure of different companies. So here, in relationship with the community, it is fundamental for us to have trained operators with good wages and salaries. Our companies should promote a real social, educational, economic progress of our community more than in any other chain. We need to value our role here. And the last point is the gradual zero emissions or decarbonization of our production. This is a challenge. We can think about how to apply technology to achieve this zero emissions goal, as far as companies have the resources in place to continue investing in their productive structures. These are the key points for an agenda not only of steel, but an agenda that may be the agenda World Steel and the associations of each countries. These are the points on which we can strengthen our industry and regain growth potential, which is implicit in the low levels of consumption we have today. Alacero is an association that gathers the most important companies of the sector. They need to play a relevant role in the promotion of an industrial agenda for all the countries, not only an agenda for the industries of steel, but also to help promote the real industries, to promote the real aims of the different manufacturing industries. The actions of each country to achieve this goal may be stimulated or promoted by Alacero and by the institutions of each country. Thank you for your attention, and thank you once again, Alacero, for giving me the opportunity of interacting with you all here.